Yeah, welcome along. Good to have you with us this morning. Sadly, Vicky is on her sick bed, so get well soon. I'm sure she's watching, but we'll do my best to guide these through the next couple of hours, starting at the Etihad and the Manchester derby. City with just one win in 10 games in all competitions. And Kaveh, interesting to hear Pep Guardiola, I guess, showing the stresses and strains of management this week. He says, do I sometimes lose my head? Yes, I sleep worse. I don't digest food properly now. I always have to eat like only soup at night. It shows you, and anyone who sort of knows him and the relentlessness and the meticulousness that he does his job with, maybe isn't surprised at how much he's struggling with where City are right now.
I mean, I think on a personal level, it is a little bit concerning what Pep Guardiola is going through at the moment. You just feel like the relentlessness of modern football is catching up on him, and some of the things he's been saying recently are almost a sort of cry for help. I think we've reached the tipping point as far as the match calendar is concerned, because clubs like Manchester City are being asked to play so many games. And I think it's just starting to catch up on Pep Guardiola, because the amount of pressure he's under, the amount of work he has to do, the media scrutiny, the number of interviews and press conferences, it is just relentless. And you feel like you almost want to put your arm round his shoulders and say, look, Pep, you need a holiday. You know, you need a break from it all. But I think he's just looking at this season and everything that is going on around him and Manchester City. And even if he looks forward to the summer, he'd be thinking, OK, at least at the end of the season, I can have some time off. But no, at the end of the season, he's got to go with Manchester City and play in the Club World Cup, which is going to take a month, 5 weeks. And then if they get to the final of that, then it's just 2.5, 3 weeks before the season starts again. So I think maybe it's a debate for another day, but I just sense, looking at Pep Guardiola, he's sort of symbolising what we're putting players and managers through. And I think he is reaching a point where he is just saying, and you heard from his comments in his news conference, where he said, look, the problem is the schedule. It is simply how much we're being asked to play and travel and everything else that we have to do around these games.
And there are 2 points, Darren, there that, A, I think sometimes we underestimate just how difficult a job this is. And it's all very easy for us to sit here in this studio and speculate about why he's got his tactics wrong. But it's actually an incredibly hard job. And also, when you're Pep Guardiola, used to living right at the very top, unfortunately, ultimately, the only way is down. And there will come a day, which has arrived now, where it is really tough. And he is not used to being in this position where he's watching his team lose a lot of games.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We've never seen this from Pep Guardiola, not just at City, but in his managerial career. I slightly disagree with Kaveh in so much as all the points you made I totally agree with, and I think they're a debate for now. I don't think that we should normalise what we're seeing Pep Guardiola go through. Football, we love football. Everyone watching this loves football. Everyone connected with football loves the game. But I cannot tell you that a single person would love what Guardiola very physically and clearly emotionally is going through right now. The sight of Pep Guardiola with scratches on his head, with a cut lip, with scratches on his nose, we can't sit here and say, well, at least he cares. No, if we saw that in the show business world, if we saw that in a political arena, if we saw that in any other arena, we'd have justified concern.
Well, I think you saw that in an office job, you'd get sent home, wouldn't you?
Well, absolutely.
Signed off.
And why would we suddenly say that, seeing it in this context, well, it's OK if he wins the Manchester derby, or it's justified if he drives his team against the odds to yet another Premier League win. I know the League Managers Association years ago, when there was conversation around the physical well-being of certain managers, and they were at pains, very proactive in letting people know what they were doing to support those managers and the programmes that they were putting them on, just to make sure, because we have seen cases, haven't we, where Premier League managers' physical health has been impacted by the stresses and the strains of the game. And I absolutely think this is a conversation, as you rightly pointed out. It's for now. It's so. I love the City derby, the City United derby. I love seeing managers at the very top. And let's not kid ourselves. It's within the English psyche when someone's dominating for a long time to say, well, who can take them down? But there's taking somebody down, and then there's looking at somebody as celebrated, as visionary, as important to the Premier League as Pep Guardiola, and us maybe having to verbalise the fact that maybe he needs to look after himself first and put football second.
It reminds me of a song by the Kinks that I was listening to yesterday.
They're an old band, are they?
Yes, yeah, an old band.
Before my time.
70s. But it was a song written by their lead singer, Ray Davies, and he wrote it in 1970, and it was after 5 years where they'd been very, very successful. They'd been relentlessly touring, recording albums, doing interviews. And he wrote this song, This Time Tomorrow, about being on a plane, flying from one gig to another gig and not knowing where he was going. And he was sort of having a crisis of confidence and he didn't know who he was. And I sort of, when I was listening to that song, I thought of Pep Guardiola being on a plane, flying to another game, coming back from another game, sort of not knowing, where he was going, what was happening in his life. And you got a sense of that from some of the interviews he gave this week, especially one, I think, to a Spanish podcast where he said, look, what I want to do with my life is, sort of have my life back and cook and play golf and sleep normally again. And I just think we need to have this debate about what Pep Guardiola is going through and whether human beings are wired to be able to cope with the kind of workload that he has to shoulder at the moment.
I mean, I guess you would say it's sort of why Jurgen Klopp comes to the point last season where he says, I'm tired, I'm running out of energy. It's a very similar between two of the great managers of the modern day.
We have to listen. It's so important because we talk so much about mental health, well-being. We have campaigns all over the industry about mental health, about well-being, and yet we've got the highest profile manager in the country in plain sight going through a nightmare. I think that steps outside of football and speaks to something very, very different.
And a lot of this has to do with UEFA expanding the Champions League. So we've got all these extra Champions League games at the moment, and it's got to do with FIFA coming up with this new Club World Cup, which is going to last a month at the end of the season that Manchester City have to play in.